Hello and welcome back to part 4 of the Making of a Journal series. If you've been following along with the previous videos in this series, you will have seen that we've chosen our papers and dyed our papers. We've trimmed the pages with some stitching and some pockets, assembled them into signatures. We've created our hard cover, and today we're going to be looking at binding those pages into the cover. Now, the method that I'm doing for this is the same as obviously this previous book that I'd made, and it's a hidden binding. It's hollow spine. The pages are stitched onto a piece of Tyvek, which is then mounted inside, so you don't see the stitching through the actual spine of the book. And as I say, the best thing, the most popular thing that people use is Tyvek. Now this is like a synthetic paper. It's fibrous, it's strong, it doesn't tear, so it's lightweight but really sturdy, and that's what we want. We need something that's got some strength in it. So as I say, I've cut myself a piece of Tyvek, and I've actually cut a piece the same size as the panel that I used for my cover, which was 6 inches by 9 inches. Now, I've been trying to avoid giving out measurements. I know that people are making them their own size, you know, and if your pages are a different size, your covers are a different size, you'll want your Tyvek to be a different size. But I have made it so that it's the same height as my book cover, which in this instance is 9 inches. And I've made it 6 inches wide so that I've got 2 inches in the middle for my spine, which was the diameter, was the width of the spine that we used was 2 inches, and then 2 inches on either side to attach to the inside covers. We need to glue that in place, and then we'll hide the joint with some decorative paper. So a good scale then is whatever the height of your book cover, that's how tall you want it to be, and make it 3 times the width of your spine. That should be more than enough. You want it just to be secure, but that should be absolutely fine. So I've just drawn out a little template on a piece of card here, just so you can see a little bit more easily, and I'm going to transfer the measurements onto this piece of Tyvek. So obviously I've drawn a line at 2 inches in and from each side, so that's sort of denoting where the spine is going to be. And because I've got 4 signatures, I've then marked out 4 more lines evenly spaced within that area, and those are the lines that I'm going to mark where my stitching is going to go. And that way the 4 signatures will be stitched into the centre of this piece of Tyvek nice and evenly, and hopefully nice and straight, and it'll all sit well within the book cover. So the other thing that I have made in advance is a little template here, and this piece of card, this is actually shorter. This is the exact height of my pages, because this is the template that I'm going to use for making the holes in the signatures. So you want that to be the exact same height that your page is. Doesn't matter how wide this piece of card is. I think this one was 1.5 inches. Doesn't really matter particularly, but you want the height to be correct. And I've popped a little T at the top there, just so I know that that's the top. They are evenly spaced, but if they were fractionally out and I happen to do one upside down, they might not line up. So I've just marked a T, so I know that that will always go at the top of the page. Now, the stitch we're going to use to attach it is a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. So I have marked evenly spaced throughout here 5 holes. So the easiest way to do that was find the centre point, and that was where my first hole was going to go, and then measured and divided each section there into 3 and popped a little hole in. I've just used crocodile on my small setting to do that, just so that I can sort of go through it. I can see easily, I can mark the hole if I need to. And then once I've done that, I've just scored down the middle so that that'll just crease nicely. So when we come to mark them on the pages, that'll just sit really well within the fold of each signature. But not only do we need to mark holes on our pages, we obviously need to mark holes on our Tyvek as well. So what I'm going to do is mark the holes onto this template and then I can pop the template on top of my piece of Tyvek and just mark through using a pen. So because this is shorter, because this is obviously the height of our page, this is the height of our cover, I've drawn a little line top and bottom across here so that I know that that is lined up centrally within it with an even spacing at either end. And what I'm going to do is just taking a pen or a pencil, line up my little line on there and just mark through where my holes will go. And I'm going to do that on all the lines. All the way across, and then we can make a hole. If you've got a crocodile, like a big bite with a long reach that'll reach, do it. If not, a pokey tool will do it. Just make the hole big enough that you can pop a pencil mark through or a pen mark through. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark all of these and make the holes, and I shall be back to show you what that looks like. So once you've finished your template, it should look something like that, with all the holes through there, ready to mark onto the Tyvek. And the reason that I've done it on here rather than directly on here is if I want to make another journal this size, I've already got my template. I don't have to go through any of this measuring process again. I can just cut myself a piece of Tyvek, place this on top and draw in the holes ready, and without having to measure it all out. I mean, if you're not planning on ever making another one, you can do all these measurements directly on here. That's entirely up to you. But I just like to have a template and then it's there, because that's the time consuming process sometimes, is the figuring out the spacing and the measurements. So if you've got it right, make yourself a template, pop it in a little cellophane bag with a label to say what it is, and file it away in a drawer, and you've got it for future use. So I'm going to pop my template on top of my piece of Tyvek. Now you can hold that in place with a clip if you want to, just to be sure that it doesn't move. And then using a pen or a pencil, I'm just going to mark through where I need to stitch the signatures in place, just like so. So the next thing that we need to do is mark our holes, where the holes are going to go onto the signatures. Now this is the first one of my signatures. So I'm going to make sure that I've got my pages lined up where I want them to be. And I found it quite easy to take your yellow pages. I remember the days when the yellow pages were like huge, and they just really are not now. And it just gives it something just to sort of cradle in, to be fair. And again, if you want to clip your pages together so they don't move, I'm going to just mark those in there, like so. Use a pencil. I'm putting a little pen mark so that you can see it. If you use a pencil, it won't be so obvious. You can erase it if you need to. And really now we're ready to start stitching. Now there are various things you can use to stitch. The thing that I've found that works well for me are these, this is like a linen carpet repair thread. Now these are some vintage ones that I've picked up. Pick them up quite cheaply in sort of local stores or off eBay. It's a good strong linen thread, but it's quite thin. It's not too bulky. Now you could use that. You could use quite a fine hemp cord. Again, nothing too thick or bulky. Or you could use something like this, which is a waxed linen cord. A lot of people prefer to use a waxed thread. I don't know why, I happen to like these linen repair threads. I think they work really well for me, and they're really, really strong and easy to work with. So I'm going to measure myself off a piece sort of 2.5 times the height of my page. That should be plenty. Got myself a good sturdy needle. You need something quite strong. You're going through a lot of layers. And I'm just going to thread that up, pop that to one side for a moment, and make my holes. And for that, I'm just going to use a pokey tool. So pushing down firmly and straight from the top. Just make sure you've gone all the way through and are coming out the other side. And then you should have 5 holes that are all the way through the pages in your signature. I'm going to take our piece of Tyvek. Now you have 2 options at this point. If you want the knot that you tie off your page to be on the inside here, you need to start from the inside out. If you want the knot tying off your thread to be hidden on the outside, then you want to start on the outside and work your way in. Now I'm going to work from the outside in so that I don't see the knot. In previous weeks I've done it and just tied it and trimmed the ends on the inside. That's personal preference, but wherever you start is whichever side your knot will be, so just bear that in mind. Now this is my first signature, so this is going to be on the left hand side here, and I'm going to begin. Actually, I think I'm just going to mark my holes in this as well, just to make life a little bit easier working from the other side. So right, as I'm starting on this left side, I'm going to begin by going through the centre hole, starting from the outside working in, and then finding the centre hole in my signature. Now this is always fiddliest for the first couple. Once you've got 1 or 2 threads through, it'll become easier, and it's also a lot easier when you're not trying to show it on camera, so just bear with me. So you want to pull your thread through, leave yourself an end for tying off. You don't want to lose the end through, so make sure you've left yourself some there. And you want to go back out through the next hole along. And through the hole in the piece of Tyvek. Then you want to come back in through the next hole, the top hole as it is in this instance, and in through the pages. and back out through the hole next to it again. Try not to split the thread that's in there, go alongside the thread that's in there. So now we're back on the outside, we're going to go back in again, but we're going to skip that centre hole and move down to this 4th hole down. And as you can see, it becomes a little bit easier. Your holes all seem to line up once it starts to get attached in place. And then we're going to go back out again through what is the bottom hole there. And back in through the hole above it. Again, try not to split the thread, go in alongside the thread. And then finally, we're going to go back out through our centre hole. And we can take the needle off and then just make sure we've tensioned up this thread. Just make sure it's pulled up nice and snug and you haven't got any loose bits on either side. Now make sure you have one thread on either side of this long stitch that's in the middle where we've skipped over, because we're now going to tie it down and that'll hold that in place. And just tie it firmly with either 2 or 3 knots. And trim the ends. And then that's our first signature in place. And as I say, by tying it on the outside, we've just got a neat line of stitching there inside. I did on my original journal tie it on the inside like so, and you just get these little ends on the pages, so it's entirely up to you. I just wanted to do it this time the other way, just to show you if you don't like those ends, we can hide them outside. So I'm going to now continue and stitch my other 3 signatures in place, and then we'll be at the point where we can think about starting to put this inside the cover. Once you've got all your signatures stitched into place, it should look something like this. Obviously there's a little bit of space between each signature, but we need some space to allow for any pages to bulk up a bit. But it should be in there nice and straight, nice and central, ready really to get this attached in place in our book. And the last thing that I want to do before gluing it in place is just disguise this Tyvek top and bottom with a little bit of ribbon. On my last book I added in a little bit of black ribbon. I don't know, it's not so easy to see, but it just sort of disguised the top of where that Tyvek was. I want to trim down the sides slightly, just at a bit of an angle, so they don't show when we cover it with some scrapbooking paper. So I'm going to just take my scissors and just trim it up like so on that side. You can use this piece that you've just cut off if you want as a template to be sure to get it the same, or just do it by eye. I mean, it's entirely up to you. This bit is going to be disguised, it's going to be covered. So I'm just going to do that top and bottom, just to take away a little of the excess. And I am ever so slightly going to trim a little sliver, just a couple of millimeters, off either of those edges, just because we're going to be popping the piece of ribbon on and I don't want it to extend beyond the height of the cover. So for what I did on the last one, I cut myself 2 pieces of ribbon. This is about 1.5 inches wide, which is enough to cover the area where my signatures are actually stitched in place. You could go 2 inches wide, that would be absolutely fine. So just cut in a couple of pieces of ribbon there, sort of 2 to 3 inches long, just enough to cover that Tyvek top and bottom. And I'm just going to use the Fabri-Tac glue to stick that in place. So just add in a little bit of glue on the outside. And a little bit of glue on the inside. And just pressing that in place, just making sure that it's lined up nice and straight. And just repeat that at the other end. It's just a little bit extra decoration. So once that's done, once that's dry, it doesn't take very long for that to dry. We're ready to pop these in place. Now make sure you've got your signatures the right way up to fit in your cover. And you want to fit that in nice and snugly into that spine, allowing yourself the same gap top and bottom. And use some Fabri-Tac to stick this Tyvek down onto the inside cover. So make sure you kind of know where you want it to go. Then apply some of the glue. Get that in there nice and snug. And then press it down. And then do the same on the back. Now really you want to just give this a chance to dry in completely before we move on. Opening and shutting it can cause it to move slightly, so just sort of make sure it's all lined up nicely. Sit it down, put something heavy on the top if you want, just to weight it down a little while. Give it half an hour. You don't need to give it too long. Fabri-Tac dries quite quickly, but you just want to be secure, for it to be secure before we start putting any pattern papers in. But once that's dry, we can come back and we can line the inside of the covers with some scrapbook paper. Once your signatures are glued in, once that Tyvek's stuck down nice and firm, you can think about now putting some paper on the inside. Now I choose to just cover the inside covers. I've got this decorative vellum here at the beginning of my signature. You could take a piece that's the full width and attach it here and have it as like a flyleaf on the front of your book. But I just like to cover over the inside of this cover just to neaten it off. So once again, I've cut some scrapbook paper. This is some graphic 45 paper, and I thought that the sort of design on the back echoed quite nicely the pattern that I've got on my fabric. And I've trimmed it just slightly smaller all round, as you can see, than the inside cover. So I've got two pieces that side, one for inside the front, one for inside the back. And because this was cut from a piece of 12 by 12, I was left with an extra little bit that I'm just going to create a pocket top and bottom, just for a little bit of somewhere else, a tuck spot to put a letter or a tag or something like that in place. Now, as you can see here, we can see some of this Tyvek. So before I'm going to stick this down, I'm going to add a little bit of washi tape. Now I did this on my last journal. I popped some decorative washi tape down here and in between each of the signatures, just to disguise that blank space that you can see. So, you know, this is entirely up to you, personal preference, whether you want to do this or not. I just think it finishes it off, it tidies it up a little bit. So just tucking in some of this. This is a Dina Wakley washi tape. And I just think that with that in there, once I stick that down, I haven't got that strip of just plain white showing. So I like that. It just disguises it a little bit better. So I'm going to do that there, stick this piece of paper in, and I'm going to use some narrow double-sided tape just to stick around the edges of this to make a pocket. And I'll do the same on the back as well. And I'm also going to run a little piece of washi tape in between each of these signatures just to disguise the Tyvek. And I'll be back to show you what that looks like in a minute. And here's the finished, pretty much finished book now. As you can see, the pages are bound in there. I have a little pocket tucked in the front, difficult to see, but yeah, little pocket in there. We've hidden that Tyvek and in between the signatures just with some washi tape just to disguise that, and in between the last one also there. Done the same at the back, just disguised that, lined that, got a little pocket again in the inside the back cover, and essentially that is the completed bound book. Now I do want to come back next time, and probably be 2 more weeks as we've been doing this every other week, just for a few finishing touches. On my original book here, you see I had this little chain and charm closure, so I'll show you how we can make that. I did add a few more extra little embellishments. We've got some buttons, little key charm on here, so we might do something like that as well. And I think we may just add a few little page tabs, either these little sticker ones or some die cut tabs on just onto the various sections of the book, maybe on the top, maybe on the side. Just again, a little extra embellishment, a few finishing touches. So that will just be a few ideas for next time. But as always, hope you enjoyed this. Hope you're still finding this quite straightforward and easy to follow. I've had some good feedback of saying that the instructions were nice and clear. Obviously, this one here is quite an important stage, getting the binding right. My advice, take your time. There's always going to be some awkward bits. My third signature was the awkward one to get in, and then the others were all right. So just take your time with it. If you're a little unsure how to go, maybe just have a practice, get some spare paper, just have a little practice so you kind of know what you're doing. But as I say, if you enjoyed this, as always, please leave me a thumbs up. It lets YouTube know that you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe. Click the notification bell and then you'll get a notification when I upload a new video. But I'll be back again next week with something completely different, and hopefully in 2 weeks with the final part of this series. But for now, that's all. Bye.